Welcome to the Legendary Upside Podcast. My name is Pat Kerrane. You can find all of my content at legendaryupside.com. Some of that content this summer, a big piece of that content was best ball rankings that I had out the very first day of Best Ball Mania and for DraftKings as well. And they were updated daily. I was able to do that with the help of Kyle Dvorchak and Daniel Racz, who formed the three-man best ball rankings team for Legendary Upside this summer. Guys, how's it going?
It's good. I feel like we talked about this before the show. Where we're at right now is just fun to evaluate our process. It is very clearly not indicative of how successful we're going to be. And in the end, there's almost no way any three of us will be successful, because that is just the nature of the game. You hope to be successful once in a lifetime, as Pat Kerrane has already been for a tournament like Best Ball Mania, and that's it. But with that caveat being said, that the results are not in, and even if we nail the results, the actual bank account may not make a difference. We could get to the finals, get last place, and say my expected value is nuts, and I lost. I feel like we did a pretty good job. I'm having it so far an advance rate year, like a pretty solid year. So I don't know. This will be mostly fun to look back at. And even the L's are like, we have some pretty funny L's in here.
We do have some funny L's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, life's pretty good. Kyle Pitts caught a pass on Sunday, so a lot to celebrate.
There you go. Yeah. And I guess I should say, like, generally, from my perspective, like, I'm more of a build for the playoffs kind of thing, build teams that are structured to be able to take down week 17, that are built to peak in the playoffs, targeting rookies, targeting young players, kind of fading older players, not indiscriminately, but if a player has shown signs of decline and is older, I am very unlikely to be in. Older, I think maybe can also mean younger than some people might think. I thought Dalvin Cook was washed because he was terrible in a bunch of metrics and entering a season in which he was washed. I mean, let's be clear. So we'll get to that one. But there's stuff like that where I think these rankings are kind of generally going to be tilted in that direction. And then that's also going to create some misses as well. But I think in some of this stuff, having an archetype that you're going to be a little bit higher or lower on will lead to some hits and misses, but I think can generally be good because we're never going to be 100% perfect. So you're trying to kind of capture those guys with the right ranges of outcomes. But that's, philosophically, I think that's one point to note. And these guys were generally with me, although occasionally trying to talk some sense, some market-based sense into me. One other thing is that these rankings were built with the market baked into the rankings. So the underdog ADP is pretty good, and so that was actually reflected in the rankings to where a player basically couldn't fall too much lower than, there was a threshold at which the player wouldn't be able to fall below or rise above, and kind of in between that, the rankings would kind of help push players market-based, they would kind of help reorganize players in those ranges to reflect the fact that there is a wisdom of the crowds element of this. Underdog ADP is sharp. And also, I think getting ADP value is important. So you don't want to just be out there drafting the best plays and throwing away EV because you're never letting a guy fall to you at a really good discount. That became difficult as, a player like Breece Hall was sliding in drafts. And I personally never really got him in the 5th round because he never got past me in the 4th. But that is an important element of the ranking process as well. And I think just generally drafting as well. You don't want to just throw ADP out. All right, but let's go ahead and just kind of go through. So I figured we'd go through our rankings from the summer, and we have up on the site the final iteration of the rankings, but those reflect some injuries like to Cooper Kupp and to Travis Kelce, and the Jonathan Taylor is going to be on PUP News. What I'd like us to do is kind of reflect on those, but also just generally where we were at over the course of the offseason. And, get a sense of how we feel about some of those important rankings. But just to kind of go through it, we were Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Austin Ekeler. So this is the final iteration, and we are just completely in line with ADP to close. Bijan Robinson, Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown closing out the first round. What I would throw out there is we were basically lower, and I think sometimes substantially lower on Austin Ekeler throughout the process. I think we were a little bit ahead on Bijan Robinson. We had AJ Brown over Stephon Diggs for most of the summer. At the very end, we flipped that. We were higher on Cooper Kupp really throughout most of the summer. Obviously, he's not in the first round here because of the injury. But we should probably talk about him here because he was one of the, he was like a clear kind of, I think we had him third for much of the summer. So definitely need to touch on that. And then anything else you guys had going on. Daniel, how did you feel about our first round?
I felt pretty good. Obviously, when we had the triumvirate of Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, and Christian McCaffrey, if you want to be overweight on one, you can't be overweight on another. So a lot of us, we wanted to be overweight Kupp. I personally really want to be overweight Hill, and we generally felt the depressed ADP environment for running backs made it favorable to target guys later at depressed prices like J.K. Dobbins, sadly, but then also wins like Travis Etienne and Breece Hall. So that lended it, I assume, to most drafters having overweight stances on Kupp and Hill prior to Kupp's injury, but underweight stances on McCaffrey.
Yeah, I will say the greatest fantasy running back of all time was sitting there at 3 a lot of times, and we didn't take much of him. Our rankings reflect sort of Pat Kerrane's beliefs, and then me and Daniel try and reel him in and influence him.
That is essentially the process.
Yeah, I mean, like to be fair, like it's not my site. I'm here to like help and try and talk to you, and I enjoy what I'm doing. But like, it's your site, and we're just sort of a checks and balances system for you. And no, my point being
and
is that
checks and balances system, though. I feel like you guys got me wanting off some good stuff.
But at no point in my checks and balances did I ever consider having you rank McCaffrey 1 or 2. The point I'm making is that as much as I'm making fun of us for the McCaffrey ranking, which is fine because especially in the triumvirate, if you ended up getting to Hill, he's on pace to just annihilate the receiving yards record. You're going to be fine there. It's weirdly the spot that we never thought about taking him was like 1, 2, where 1, Justin Jefferson, fine. I think you just run bad there. 2, Chase, like I think I'm going to say like you probably should have just been taking McCaffrey regardless.
Yeah.
Oh, the Joe Burrow injury, like sure, I get it.
Or
it could
Hill,
have been
frankly.
better. Yeah, you could have been
or
taking
Kupp,
Hill there.
or honestly Kupp. Like
and Kupp,
like
another one like Chase, bad run out. If things ran out better, just health wise, nothing else, you should have been taking Kupp there too. Like Chase should be
Kupp, I think actually. Yeah. What I think is, what do you guys think of the McCaffrey thing? It's funny because the way I drafted I have a pretty solid amount of McCaffrey on Underdog. I don't have really very much on DraftKings, which is
that's maybe why I'm spurned by this so much, because I drafted a lot more on DraftKings.
Yeah. So I wonder if people have a similar experience that use the rankings and I think one of the things that's sort of extra tough about, like I did, some of the higher stakes stuff on DraftKings, and I was extra worried there about not being able to get wide receivers later. And so I think I even broke ties more against McCaffrey, which hurts more because, he's even better in PPR. But I do want, I think that this could be one of those things where in a vacuum, we just all should have had more McCaffrey, full stop. But in the macro landscape, because there were 2 questions, like who do you want to prioritize between these 3 players? And I think we missed there for sure. And maybe if we expand it to who do you want to prioritize between these 5 players, because Chase really shouldn't have been totally untouchable, then we definitely missed. The macro environment question, I feel like we didn't fully miss on, because the wide receivers that we felt like were getting pushed up do feel like they got pushed up. Like those wide receivers that were like, man, really? We're taking this guy here? Like largely those misgivings feel like they were proven out. And there were some major running back values available. And I think, Daniel, I'm glad you mentioned Dobbins, because I think he kind of, we'll never really know for sure, but he feels like after watching Gus Edwards just smash, we kind of know that he was one of those guys too. So they're really like structurally ways to recover from missing on McCaffrey, but also wish we had McCaffrey higher.
Yeah, I wonder, especially though, if like the relative value of like the gap of McCaffrey to RB2 could be one of the highest like 1-2 gaps we'll ever see. And although I do agree that like you could have just gotten, we started to get really high on Travis Etienne. I think, Daniel, that's a credit to you, is like in the middle of the summer, maybe it's even like kind of 2/3 of the way through the summer, we're like, oh yeah, we have him one spot ahead of ADP or one below, whatever. Like when we flipped guys around, he was there. Daniel was like, he could like easily lead the league in rushing yards and like rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
And we're like, that's a pretty good point. Let's move him up. And then Ken Walker was sort of a similar thing where we, would have him around ADP, but like it was very easy to see the supreme talent. So there were some very obvious hits that did not need to come in the first round. The first like 3 rounds, really. The first 3 rounds sucked for running backs. Like the quote hits are like Josh Jacobs staying healthy and get all the touches and doing nothing with it, and Tony Pollard staying healthy, getting all the touches and doing nothing with it. So there were easy ways to get the RB like 2 through 12 performances, year to date after 8 weeks minus Monday Night Football. But I do think McCaffrey is going to provide like such a massive relative advantage. The only player who is going to rival that will probably be Tyreek Hill, I'd imagine, because he's literally on pace for like 17 touchdowns and 2,200 receiving yards. Yeah. But the gap between McCaffrey and whoever finishes as the RB2 is almost certainly going to just absolutely destroy. So I think from that macro angle, it is still like, I think he has the second most fantasy points ever in a season in half PPR, behind like only the LaDainian Tomlinson 27-point season. And then his season where he only played a few games was another one of the greatest seasons ever. Like, so very obvious that he fits the legendary upside bill, but like he fits it to a degree that literally by his greatest season, one other running back has ever fit in a cohort of maybe 5 running backs in NFL history have ever hit. And he's doing it this year, obviously. So
yeah, the legendary upside thing, because when I had that set up for myself to do, like I had done kind of the legwork, like some of the stuff on paper, and McCaffrey this year, because of age, really, I think didn't like fully, like he didn't like pop the way he normally does. Mm-hmm. Like in years past, it's just been so obvious on paper, like, yeah, McCaffrey's like clearly the guy. But that wasn't like quite as much the case. I think, also partly like a little bit of a reduced role in San Francisco and stuff. But when I actually wrote it up, I was like, this is pretty obvious. Like this,
I feel like I remember listening. I listened to the Legendary Upside article while I was traveling, and I feel like I remember you saying like he kind of just base projects for a legendary season. Like his median projection is very close.
Yeah. And I was like, it's kind of nuts that we took like a Mount Rushmore fantasy running back like at 3 all year. Like, that's probably gonna, like in the legendary scenario, I was like, that will seem insane, and it already does seem insane. So maybe I just need to write that article earlier, because when I actually like dove into it and like thought through what does the legendary season look like, I was like, I didn't have to think that hard. That wasn't much thinking. So I think probably we should have just we shouldn't have made a stance there with a player that talented. Not that I don't think we took like a massive stance against McCaffrey.
No, it's just tough because say you do 30 drafts, or I did more than 30 drafts. Say you do 30 drafts, on average, you're getting like three picks out of that group in the top 3. You even with 30 drafts, you may come away with 0 McCaffrey. I remember at one point during the summer, I was like really trying to get my DraftKings drafts done, and I like got the 2 and the 3 like 4 times in a row, and I was like, who needs McCaffrey? I'm going to take another Chase team. I'm going to try and load up on Chase. And like week 3, I looked back on this moment. I'm like, what have I done to myself? Not that Chase is like an absolute bombing or anything. It's just at that point, he actually might have been. But like you said, he's a Mount Rushmore fantasy back of all time. Probably could have used to take more. Daniel, I don't know. I saw someone on Twitter post this. I don't know. It might have been you, Daniel. Just like weighted randomness for taking players. That would have been the ideal way to take the top 6 picks. Like they're all extremely similar, because we're talking about it. Like they're a cohort of 6 guys who any one of them, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, could literally lead the league and set the record in receiving yards. And McCaffrey is Mount Rushmore fantasy back. Just like complete RNG. I have a 1 out of 6 pick no matter where I take those guys. And maybe you could lump Kelsey in there because he's crushing as well.
I actually had almost zero CMC. I feel good on my process. You could show me CMC season. I'm like, yeah, I think my process had this baked in as a ceiling outcome. I wanted more Tyreek Hill. I wanted Cooper Kupp prior to the injury. The one regret, I drew a lot of the second pick. So I had 15% Jamar Chase. Maybe
That's
should
how I
have
am
pushed
too.
push a little bit off that. And the Wade randomness point, I think Hilo made that point, so I want to give credit to him.
Okay, that's who it was. Sorry.
And this will probably bring us into the conversation about the running backs later in the drafts. I felt really good about some of these young backs. We missed on some. Jonathan Taylor misread that situation, thought Jim Irsay wasn't as fixated with helping Wales and more fixated on either signing or trading his top star young running back. But I mean, the J.K. Dobbins situation was absolutely perfect, and you were getting him at the 6-7 turn. I think the 2 for 2 wouldn't seem that crazy with J.K. Dobbins 6-7 turn, when you could Travis Etienne 4-5 turn, when you could Breece Hall 4-5 turn, when you could Ken Walker 4-5 turn. And I wish we were more aggressive on Walker in the young running back offense we want to believe in, and thinking more about what he could do if he takes one step in the pass game or the rest of his role stays the same, rather than, oh, we think he can't catch passes, and trying to be more open-minded to those situations.
Let's talk through the kind of next group of running backs. Ekeler leads that in the rankings, but for a long time didn't. We had the contract issue with Ekeler. We had, the potential for them to bring in someone else for kind of the early off season. And then I had some concerns, about his role in 2022 being really driven by a lot of injuries, them being healthier at the time. And also he is an older back. Like, he's, I believe, almost 28 now. And so it was a little bit tougher for me to get there, with that kind of early first round value. And so we kind of lagged behind for most of the summer. It's a little hard to know if that was like a big mistake, given that he, has been dealing with injury. Has taken a while to kind of recover and come back and be pretty productive. But it's not like, I would say Ekeler does not look like he's done. So, from that perspective, and not that we thought he was definitely done, but there's risk factors when you get older, when you're drafting an older running back. He's certainly not had the best season so far, but on the other hand, he is kind of someone that you probably would like to have going forward. How do you guys feel about the process on Ekeler?
I feel process-wise, I feel fine. You pointed out that, you pointed out to us during the summer that, like, his rushing efficiency numbers were pretty poor last year. He was getting there on touchdowns and receiving work. And, like, I accept that he can do that again. Whereas McCaffrey, I'm like, oh, man, he's, like, one of the best fantasy backs of all time. I actually do feel bad about. I had the exact same situation where I was drawing the 2-hole like you wouldn't believe, and just felt like the luckiest man alive getting all of the chase teams. And I just kept taking him. I don't really, if I had drawn, like, 7 or 8, whatever pick you needed to get Ekeler, and had full faded him, like, I wouldn't feel too bad, because I feel like the process was very the risk is high here, not just like, oh, running backs bust at a higher rate, but specifically because he got so good on touchdowns these past 2 years, and so much of his work came through the air because they lost all of their receivers, that it wasn't the baseline projects for this guy to almost have a legendary season. It's easy to see how he gets there. He's done it for 2 years now, or close to it at least, but it wasn't as ironclad as McCaffrey. And when that's not the case, I'd prefer to be going AJ Brown, Travis Kelce, even Stephon Diggs, or at least, splitting between him and Diggs. So I feel, he's, like you said, Pat, I probably wish at today that I had, 20% Ekeler, but I'm fine with where I went. Like, I think he looks like he's going to, he crushed yesterday. So I think he's going to end up being a good pick. But process wise, I feel like we pointed out all the right things that made him fragile. I don't have a problem with where we had him.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think I'm sitting around 8% Ekeler. I think if you use the rank, you'd probably be slightly underweight Ekeler, and the base would be 8.3%. I don't think that's a bad place to be, especially when he was often going near AJ Brown and Steph Diggs, or having pretty decent seasons.
Yeah.
AJ Brown, you're thrilled if you have any overweight position on him, and the ranks pointed you in that direction the whole year.
Yeah, at the very end, we were not AJ Brown over Stephon Diggs, but for the vast majority of the offseason, we were. One of the reasons for that, so Open Score was just released last week, and AJ Brown was an absolute star in ESPN's open score the last few years. He is again this year. And Devonta Smith was not. Now, he wasn't like terrible, but he was like kind of whatever. He was also like, if you look at the first read targets last year, AJ Brown had a much better rate there, and has generally been someone that sees a higher share of first read targets, which to some extent reflect play calling. Devonta Smith was kind of mediocre there. AJ Brown was elite there last year. So now we were not low on Devonta Smith because we were high on that offense, and I think he is a talented player. But I do think we generally took the position that AJ Brown is the number one in this offense, and it's not a 1A, 1B.
I wish we had taken that position more relative to Devonta Smith, because we were right on AJ Brown. And you look at, like you said, his open score, his first read targets, even his yards per route run. He's got like just a tier below Julio Jones level of like elite seasons back to back to back to back of yards per route run. So feel great about that, in that he is like just very clearly, I think, one of the 5 most talented receivers in the NFL. I think if he played for the Dolphins, if he played for the Rams, who are passing at such a high clip, he could be a Cup. He could be a Tyreek Hill. He wouldn't produce in the same way Tyreek Hill does, but he could put up those types of numbers. So I feel great betting on that talent, and then being vindicated pretty immediately because he looks great.
I talked about philosophy earlier, and I think maybe talked around things a little bit, where like generally I think we are trying to rank players as much as it makes sense to, based on their talent. We're trying to let the talent shine through here, not be so situation focused, although situation obviously has a big impact. But to the extent we can be like, this play, like who's projects more, or who's better, I think is like an underrated
position where they have so much, even at running back. Like I feel like we did some really good stuff at running back, but there is to some degree like only so much a running back's talent can push through. A receiver's talent, and tight end to a degree, can really shine through. And I think we did a really pretty solid job at that.
A receiver can take over an offense, like we saw with Devonta Smith, right? Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, there's a pecking order there. If there's a pecking order at the running back position, it can remain in place for a long time because one player leaves the field for the other to come on. At wide receiver, both players are on the field the entire time. And so the pecking order, I think, can get shifted much more quickly because the other, the more talented receiver is more talented and is able to earn the targets and is able to execute on plays that are called, where the quarterback's looking at his side of the field first. It's like all of a sudden things can start to look very different. It's also just more of a highly volatile position. So what we think we know about, target shares and stuff isn't always even true. So I think with AJ Brown, pretty good. That was one of our better, like, this guy, we're just like betting on the talent here. We're going to break ties between him and Diggs. Not that, Diggs is very talented in his own right, but AJ Brown really does. I strongly believe that if he was in like a pass heavy offense, we'd be taking him, with one of the top picks in the draft. Like he's insanely good at playing wide receiver. Like it's always been, he's not in the right offense. He's not, there's not enough targets for him or whatever. And he's just like, yeah, there are now, because I'm going to make enough targets for me. I'm going to have one of these old school mid 2000s target shares, but which obviously, is kind of an unlikely outcome in some ways. But I also think that guys this talented kind of make things happen.
Yeah, it's more likely to have. You're more likely to we're like, oh well, how is he going to get a 30+% target share when Devonta Smith's out there? It's because he's that good. And of course, a 30+%, 35% target share, a ton of the team's air yards, like 40%, isn't the most likely outcomes you pointed out. But we can shift the ranges of outcomes when we know a guy is this good. So.
Yeah, I think that was a great point. There's a lot of input volatility on team pass attempts and other things of that nature, but those are dictated by talent. And you look at the three of us, we clearly just watch 20, 40 hours of football a week. We're basically NFL scouts. We can identify the best players much more easily than we can project the input. So
Amen,
when you give
brother.
opportunities at wide receiver with proven studs like AJ Brown, you can take them. And this year, the market even let you do that at running back with young dynamic players, where the market priced in negatively talent issues that we were confident wouldn't be there on ascending players that you're able to capitalize on.
Yeah. I think the market overall, I think this didn't work out in every case, as we'll get to, but I think in a lot of cases, betting on talent this year was a huge edge and something that the market may have moved away from a little bit compared to past years. And, I think that when you're talking about a game that lasts an entire NFL season and all the money is paid out in the final, second to last week of the regular season of the NFL year, then talent is something we want to be paying attention to more. So I think, like, compared to traditional fantasy, this best ball game, this best ball tournament game we're playing, we should be emphasizing talent more, and probably a lot more. And this year it felt like there were really big opportunities. AJ Brown, I wouldn't even say was like one of the biggest.
Yeah, we were a spot and a half ahead of ADP or whatever.
Yeah, we were spot and a half
ADP. Got
ADP.
him more, but yeah.
He was generally, but it was one of those prices that I think did make some people kind of queasy because of the projection-based element of it, which like I admit was a little bit of a leap, but it was just like, this guy's so good. What are we not? We're not going to take this guy who's incredible for an entire NFL season in a format that rewards spike weeks and end of season production. So, yeah, I'm glad we had him where we did. Devonta Adams is probably another guy who we could talk about as like a my headphones just died. Devonta Adams is a guy we could talk about as like a talent-based play in a sense, where he's like one of these older dudes that we stuck with. Kyle, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were generally in the right ballpark, though I will say, like, especially in recent weeks, his target share has been kind of taking a little bit of a hit with Jacoby Myers, who we were good on Jacoby Myers too. But I do think, I mean, it just depends how you split it. If we had flipped the first 4 weeks and the second 4 weeks of the season, Devonta Adams would look like a smash. And right now I'm a little bit uncertain. And like his first read targets are taking a dip as of recently, which is curious. But it's sequencing to some degree. Maybe it's a pattern, but maybe it's our pattern seeking brains. I still feel pretty good about it. I think even after the recent dip in target share, he's still like, 6th in target share and like 7th in air yard share. And those are the guys we should really be taking big swings on. I do agree that like the age is somewhat of a concern, but at some point, especially with a player who has been so good, like if a guy has been solid throughout his career and we don't have any signs of decline, even at 28 or 29, I'm still like, it's probably coming for him. But with a guy who's been one of the best receivers of my lifetime, in the 10 best receivers of my lifetime, 15. If you really don't like Devonta Adams, I need to see it. I need to see that he is declining before I have any belief in it. It's sort of the same way with Travis Kelce. Like, oh, but what about his like air yards? They're going slightly down. Or what about his preseason snaps? They played him like no. He has to show me that he's declining because he's that good. We took that position with Adams, and I feel pretty good about it. He's maybe not going to be a smash the way AJ Brown is, but I think that's another good process play.
Let's move to the back of the second round, where I feel like I should know, do you guys feel like we got bailed out with Chubb? Because Chubb seemed like he was going to be a pretty good pick. But then also this Watson stuff, maybe Watson.
No, Deshaun Watson was terrible. I feel
he
had one good game so far this year. It was against the Titans. Every other game's been bad to really bad. That was a ton of what I was baking in, is that like the floor risk for the offense is 32nd in the NFL. Chubb, was definitely going to be good. And I think we got bailed out a little bit and that he was going to catch passes. And not that we never believed he had a chance to catch passes, but it was something where we talked about, like, he's never done it his entire career. Do we think he can do it this year? Can, yes. Will, I'm a little less confident in the will part.
He wasn't going to do it enough for a legendary season. I think that was clear, but he also just looked so good.
Yeah.
You're like,
was he going to score 20 touchdowns on this version of the Browns offense? I personally don't think so. I think it was going to be unlikely given how bad the Browns have looked. Obviously, like, I'm not even including the PJ Walker or Dorian Thompson-Robinson games. Watson himself looked really bad outside of the Titans game. So I don't feel too bad about it, though I do think we could have done a better job seeing like, oh, this is a guy who's a supreme talent that everyone loves. He's going to rise from May to
August. I think
that would be the miss.
Yes. But
the end of season rank, I didn't draft him once at the end of the season.
We weren't high enough on him. Yeah, in the late second round when he was there, we weren't high enough at him for sure. And I think in general, Daniel, I think you had a really good sense on kind of the market and where we should be ahead of guys for closing line value purposes. But that was one we just weren't aggressive enough, I think, early on, knowing it's like Nick Chubb, he always rises.
Yeah, I think we had a good job together outlining what Nick Chubb's true range of outcomes was, and he probably was going to hit somewhere in the 60 to 80th percentile, but that's probably closer to a silent killer scenario than something that you had to have.
Mm-hmm.
But we also should have thought about that range of outcomes and thought, how will this generally be perceived? And that's not a player with an ADP of 20 to 24. That's more like 12 to 16. Whereas I think a true ADP in the mid-second was perfectly fine in terms of just at the end of the season. But if you want to get in, wish we had a little earlier.
Yeah, process-wise, I mean, obviously, you don't want Nick Chubb on teams, but process-wise, I think we definitely should have done that. So as we talk about the second round, which just was not very good. The second round was just bad this year. I think we did a couple things. One is that we kind of put Mark Andrews like on the second round bubble the whole offseason. We basically had him right around the 2-3 turn. He ends here at 23, way ahead of ADP. That I think is a pretty big win. Although so far, it is a bit touchdown driven at the moment. It's not like the smashiest smash ever, but I think what else were you supposed to do? I think it's like, take Mark Andrews is pretty good.
Yeah, it's been good for Andrews. Like, I wish it could be better. I'd love a few 20-yard games, but like you said, you don't need the smashiest of smashes from Andrews. This range, it's quarterback or Mark Andrews, according to us, which was right, or bust, man. Like the number 2 receivers in this range are just not good.
And these are the running backs.
Neither are the running backs. Yeah. Neither are the running backs either. I guess to me that's not awfully surprising. Well, it's very dead zoney. But I thought the receivers would be better. I'm not shocked that the running backs who are classic, like in the dead zone. I thought they were better. Like I thought Tony Pollard was better. I thought early of the season Nick Chubb deserved to be like ranked better. But just everyone sucks here. So Mark Andrews feels like a oasis.
We did have Tony Pollard here. Back when he was a little bit less expensive at the end of the summer, he kind of got pulled up the board. We also had Breece Hall in this general range earlier before the Dalvin Cook signing and his ADP tanked. So in some ways, like that was in your early drafts, you'd be like, all right, that's cool. But
on that note,
I think, oh, good.
Yeah, I quickly remember early drafts having Breece Hall and Ken Walker at the 2-3 turn, then midsummer seeing 4-5 turn both. I'm like, oh, the CLV and these teams are dead. And now if you gave me the opportunity, it's like Breece Hall and Ken Walker at the 2-3 turn, I'm doing it once every day and twice on Sundays.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think the quarterback thing, we were probably on the more skeptical side of these quarterbacks going in the second round. They close with all 3 of them outside of the second round, which is behind ADP. I think I guess we had them Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, and maybe we had them that way all summer. I remember personally feeling like the least nervous about Hurts, but
I was going to say, I thought we had Mahomes not as the first one at some point.
I think
we're talking about the most minor of flippings of these guys, so it's not a big deal. But I feel like we had him second at some point.
I think ADP adjusted. We decided to let the market put Mahomes first because the market was so sure Mahomes was QB1, whereas we said these 3 are
I think that's right.
Similar probability bets enough that if you can get Mahomes later than ADP, it's fine to take him. You shouldn't be taking him at ADP. Whereas Hurts and Allen, we were less frowning upon taking at ADP. And they're probably going to come out as wins because everyone around them is such a big loss. So, you have a comparative advantage taking the least bad option.
Yeah.
And I also think they're going to come out as wins because Anthony Richardson got hurt. Kirk Cousins just tore his Achilles. Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles. Like all these
Justin
quarterbacks
Fields hurt. Like
Justin Fields hurt.
A more mid-round smash.
Yeah.
Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
Look, as someone who drafted some Desmond Ridder. Yes. Jimmy Garoppolo hurt.
Yeah. I think some of the upside that really was there in the late rounds, and maybe Aaron Rodgers wouldn't. I mean, he played like one snap, so who knows? But but certainly Cousins and also we weren't that high on Rodgers, but a huge injury in that range. Richardson we were quite high on, and Cousins I think we were about even with, and both those guys, I think just like the macro kind of picture of the quarterback position is really impacted by those injuries, because like how do you catch the guy who has Hurts? It's like, well, you catch him with probably hitting on Andrews, right? Or hitting on one of those running backs early in the offseason, or maybe one of these wide receivers comes to life a little bit. And then you can tack on similar quarterback production later that you got much cheaper, and that 2v2 ends up working out for you. But those 2v2s are injury decimated, and then also this group of skill players has generally not delivered. So I kind of feel like, it's tough, because it's like that is sort of maybe the thesis of the play if you were drafting a bunch of quarterbacks earlier. Like, I don't love these skill position players, presumably, and I'm not that afraid of the late quarterbacks. I think that second part is the tough thing, because those late quarterbacks, I think, were pretty good. Like, not the late, but like the quarterbacks going in,
Tua, Richardson, Cousins feels like it
Dak,
could have been.
Dak just put up a monster score. Yeah.
Maybe Geno.
Maybe Gene. Yeah, but that general group, I think that general group was much stronger this year than it was in 2022. And there's versions of this season where we're like, just Richardson, just take Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
But that we don't live in that one. So that's going to be tough, because I think ultimately, if you're drafting off these ranks, you're going to have lighter positions on the elite quarterbacks. And I think ultimately you'll have wanted to have those guys. Now, I personally was mixing them in sometimes in the second round. I don't think we were like so low on these guys that you wouldn't have them. But certainly I would say if you were just like drafting off these ranks all summer, you're underweight the elite quarterbacks. And it's one of those ones where I don't feel like we screwed up exactly, but it didn't play out in a way that's going to end up being a good move, probably.
Yeah, I'm fine with how we played it, because one, like you said, you were perfectly able to mix them in. We had Mahomes, Hurts, Allen basically back to back in the rankings. We were 3 spots behind ADP, under 3 spots, and under 1 spot for Josh Allen. So yeah, Daniel said it's 8.3% is your 1 out of 12 shot of getting players. Probably getting like 6, 5, 7, probably really close to 8 for Allen. We're less than 1 spot relative to ADP. So I don't feel too bad, and I do think the quarterback spot, as you pointed out, they hit the parlay, which wasn't a extremely long odds parlay, but they did hit the parlay of any other situation or any other section of quarterback is going to struggle in that like Richardson Cousins range, which felt good, is obviously going to be a huge bust because of those 2 players. Late round quarterback, there's just not a ton of juice back there. And then the range in which they're going has been terrible. Like, just truly no hits in this range. So it wasn't like that's part of the thesis of the play, but they hit their thesis perfectly. I don't feel too bad about it, mostly because we still had them as perfectly fine picks. We just like some players in their range better. I think maybe what we could have done is had a little more conviction in some of our like fades right above them. We had Calvin Ridley just above them, still a little bit behind ADP. But that was one where we were all very skeptical of it. We're like, do we really want to go 0 Calvin Ridley from the month of August onward?
My guess is if you're drafted on the ranks, you don't have much Calvin Ridley, because that's one where, and I don't like that this happened, to be honest, because it's just like it puts people in a tough spot if we end up being wrong. But we were like always behind the market on Calvin Ridley. There were times where like, man, we should at least get even with the market. We've been behind market all summer, and he does seem to be having a really good training camp. The people are going to continue to get excited. Let's get even. We'd get even, and the next day he'd rise by 3 spots in ADP. And it's like, you never could catch up to him. And I think we closed behind.
2.5 picks behind.
Yeah. So we never got higher really than the 2-3 turn. We never chased him into the second round, which ultimately is good. But it was kind of one of those ones like, man, I sometimes would take him at the 3-4 turn and be like, all right, I guess I'll mix him in, but then, that was like, I kind of regretted not doing that more, obviously, when he's going in the 2-3 turn, but he was just one where, we had a fade. It was a bigger fade actually than I would have preferred, but ultimately the market got a little carried away there. So I'm okay with it.
I think similar to Nick Chubb, we had it pegged decently well. We just did not get the market. The market was not in sync with us, and it kept moving him up to a point where like, this is crazy. Remember, we had the T. Higgins conversation. I think it was Kyler Pat, one of you said, next week we're going to have to talk about if we want to move Calvin ahead of T to be with the market. Why don't we just do it now? And I don't even know what we did because we were really hesitant to move Calvin Ridley with so much uncertainty.
I think I made us do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter because he moved up far enough ahead of T that it was like, yeah, of course you should have moved him ahead of T. What are you talking about? And we were still way behind. Oh, that one was kind of funny. One thing I'll note on the quarterback thing is that we were ahead of market on Lamar Jackson all summer. And personally, I mixed in some of that Lamar Jackson Andrews kind of stack to try to get some of those guys together at the 2-3 turn. And I think by the rankings, we closed with him at 30th, but he was going at like the 3-4 turn or even in the 4th round for a lot of the summer. Yeah. And we basically had him like just a hair behind the top 3 in our pure rankings. And yeah, I mean, so that one I feel good about, where you're like, okay, maybe you're light on Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen, but you should be pretty overweight Jackson. So it wasn't like we were just out on elite quarterbacks as a whole. We had kind of mistakenly thought there's a difference between passing on Chris Olave and, Keenan Allen, when actually, yeah, there is, but it's not the way we thought. The 3rd round was probably like our best round, where we were high on Lamar. We were really high on Andrews. We were oddly low on Rhamondre Stevenson for much of the middle of the summer.
I don't think that was oddly.
I was going to say, I feel like that wasn't that odd, Pat. I feel like you strongly pointed out that like he's good, but guys who are just good in this range, that's what a dead zone guy looks like. And they had made their intentions very, very, very clear to bring someone in. That's also feels like the hallmark of a dead zone kind of guy. I wouldn't say it was odd. I thought you kind of laid out the case of us liking him as a talent, but seeing red flags shooting up into the sky. So I wouldn't say it was odd. I feel like you kind of nailed it almost.
There's no player we handled better than Rhamondre in terms of thinking of outside risks, like bringing in Dalvin.
I don't know. We nailed Breece Hall. I feel like we really got that.
Yeah, Breece Hall is clearly the best one.
In a lot of in a process way. In a process way. In a
process, not in a market-based way. In a market-based way, you could have gotten cheaper Hall, but like also,
I don't know.
Are you mad that you didn't?
I was going to say in a market-based way. As soon as we started getting the Dalvin Cook rumors, both Daniel and I reined you in to the point of like,
you made me
believe
pull
in his
him down.
talent, but we were very confident in reading how the Jets were going to play it. And then, I think at some point we ended up getting like behind ADP because we were like, a signing is so imminent. We still want to be in on his talent. We're not going to nuke him out of the rankings, but we know we're going to get Cleve here soon.
Yeah, there was like a 3-day period when Dalvin visited New York where I think we might have been behind ADP, and then I immediately moved him back up.
Maybe we could have been a little better there, but we generally had the right read on like, oh, the signing is very likely. Let's get ahead of this. As soon as he signs, let's reverse it. Now is the time to buy. And early in the summer, like, of course, you still price in some degree of signing, but we couldn't have known at the time who or what it was going to be. So I don't know. I still feel like process-wise, we got pretty close on that one as well in judging the risk of signing, but what that actually means for him, which is to say it's 3 weeks of production. Who cares that much? And Rhamondre, we had a similar, even more accurate read is what I'd say.
Yeah, Rhamondre, I said oddly because he's a guy that I've been in on since his rookie season. I've always liked Rhamondre as a player, but we have many Discord chats of us discussing kind of Rhamondre versus Breece, and I strongly felt that Breece is a supreme talent and that Rhamondre is good, and that when you have the risk factors that Rhamondre had, like, Zeke signing there, I thought was bad. And we basically remained behind market on him, I think, throughout the entire rest of the summer. Like when it was clear they were going to sign someone, I don't think we ever got back to even, which just felt like I never really, I don't know. I mean, Zeke, this version of Zeke clearly stinks. Like this is, like he's done nothing to show he doesn't stink, but it's also been a problem for Rhamondre. And Rhamondre is obviously the talent-based argument has looked a lot weaker. That he just doesn't look that good this year. But it's always kind of volatile at the running back position. So I do, I feel good that we were that basically I was putting my foot down on the Breece is so that much better than Rhamondre. He's just that much better. And so we need to be aggressive on this one player where we can be kind of like a little bit skittish about the risk factors on kind of a middling to good talent in Rhamondre, where Breece is like flashing all the signs we look for from an elite young running back. And everything I was reading at the time from the medical community was that this is a clean tear. He'll be 100%, basically by now.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean right after he got that 50-yard receiving touchdown? That's about when
that's when he's 100%. Yeah.
And all of this Breece talk. Breece was probably one of the poster boys of our rankings of someone we were high on throughout the summer, save for that moment where we roughly read the market saying we're going to get some cleave here in a minute with Dalvin Cook. All of this comes with the context of he's playing with Zach Wilson. Like this is a 10th percentile run out for Breece, and we're still like Daniel's like, I took him to 2-3 turn once, and now I'd kill to have that opportunity back because of how bad the 2-3 turn was. This is all under the guise of Zach Wilson as his quarterback, which is a horrific.
Well, don't think I haven't thought about Aaron Rodgers coming back for the end of the regular season.
That's true.
Don't think that hasn't crossed my mind.
One thing I want to talk about is the Falcons, because we're reaching the point where if we move into the 4th round, we're at Drake London ADP. And I mean, we were, I think, very spot on about the talent of the pass catchers. Drake London, like ever since week 1, where he didn't seem particularly involved, has been just dominating the target share for this team. Kyle Pitts is going to lead the NFL in air yard share for tight ends. He's going to finish top 10 in target share. Doesn't seem to matter all that much, given how terrible this team is. Is this a priced it right? Sometimes you don't get there, or do we think we could have? And I guess you can wrote Bijan in this too, or did we sort of misjudge how bad and how I don't want to say misrun, how misaligned Arthur Smith would be with both fantasy, which is understandable. They don't need to be aligned in that sense, but also scoring points. Like he definitely seems to be slightly misaligned with scoring points. So how do you think we played that, Pat?
I mean, this was always like a big part of the range when you take Falcons. Big part of the range. But I think it's funny because the Bears are also supposed to be playing like this. And even though they've lost, I mean, you don't feel great right now about having Bears, but I don't think you feel that bad. And Justin Fields, like 2-3 weeks ago, you felt awesome. Right? Mm-hmm. It's like kind of the injury thing that's really derailed it. And the Bears took a step forward in their play calling, like very, very clearly they did, where they're not the hyper run heavy. It almost takes a lot of effort, I think, to be that off from the rest of the league. Like regression wants you to come back, things are kind of pulling you in the direction of, no, you're not going to be literally stretching out pass rate over expected charts. But Arthur Smith still is, and that maybe we should have been a little bit more understanding of who he is as a core person. And because he definitely, I'm not surprised. That he's doing this, but I just think this is one. I think maybe this is one of those ones we talked about. AJ Brown making a talent-based bet and it being a big win. This is one of those ones where this was a talent-based bet. Drake London is a very good wide receiver. I think we all agree. There's very few people in the fantasy space who would say Drake London isn't a very good receiver. And Kyle Pitts, obviously much more controversial, but for a tight end, I think is a pretty good receiver. And he provides a deep threat element to an NFL offense, which is rare at the tight end position. That's been highly, highly boom bust. We probably weren't factoring in his knee injury enough because I think that clearly had an early season impact. May continue to have an impact. I don't know. It seems like maybe he's headed in the right direction there. But health aside, I think Pitts is a talented receiver. Maybe he's been overhyped or whatnot. Probably, yeah. But these were talent-based bets. They're probably the type of bets that I do want to continue making in the future. Maybe we should have like a little Arthur Smith cutout, but maybe we don't have to worry about that for too much longer.
Yeah.
Quickly, when the Falcons win the NFC South, you're going to have to deal with Arthur Smith for at least one more year. But I thought you did a great job bringing up Philadelphia. I think Tampa Bay applies too. When you have players where you're more confident in the talent and can sort of let the market dictate how they think everything else will play out with Atlanta, I thought the market was too bearish. I want to bet on talent and assuming that I don't think anyone's ability to spot outliers is good enough to justify the extent to which they point out those outliers. So if you let me bet on Arthur Smith not being the biggest outlier we've seen in years, maybe a decade, I'll make that bet every time. Just so happens that Arthur Smith is that outlier.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I feel good about the process. I look forward to capitulating for another 10 weeks.
Yeah.
I needed this little bit of cope. Thanks, guys.
No, this is good cope. I think so. One guy that this maybe was odd, and one where I don't know, we've even like wanted to be this high on DeAndre Hopkins, but we were pretty high on DeAndre Hopkins.
I noticed that I just noticed that looking at the rankings too. Were we high on him as he was yeah, we were high on him as a free agent because we were
high on him as a free agent.
Of anytime someone signs, they move up. I think I was just shocked. I actually am shocked he's this high for us, but I think to some degree it was like, oh, he's wide receiver 23 and he's like still capable of absolutely annihilating his team's target share, like 30+%. I'm surprised we got to this high, but
I think it was maybe Burke's injury related that we ended up this high.
That's probably part of it.
And I'll pull up the rankings here just because now we're kind of past the point of where people probably remember. Sorry, I probably should have had these up before, but these are the final rankings.
That Will Levis was going to throw 4 touchdowns in his first career game, so that definitely.
Yeah, someone said that in this group. I don't know who it was. Some of us said.
Yeah, we all thought that. No, I actually do have a big old bag of Will Levis in the big board Superflex. So
I also have a big bag of Will Levis.
I got made fun of like real hard on Twitter for it too. Which fair. He was. I drafted him before I thought he was going to get drafted in the second round. Anyway, DeAndre Hopkins, I think we did a good job there of pricing in some of the high-end free agency outcomes that didn't come to fruition, but clearly the market was not pricing in enough because then he goes to Tennessee and he's still hitting. And this is one of those guys who I would say older, but the talent-based argument I thought remained pretty strong. He had a good year with the Cardinals in 2022. Obviously, he's been a star throughout his career. Did not appear to be really falling off. So, yeah, that one I feel pretty good about. DJ Moore was interesting. We ended up behind ADP in the final rankings. We were ahead of ADP early in the summer. Kind of had him close to the early 4th round, late 3rd round, kind of when he was – we were close to his original ADP. Then his ADP took a big hit, and we were, I think, about even with ADP.
We were a bit ahead, actually.
Bit ahead. Okay, good. In the late 4th. I also wrote an article on Legendary Upside specifically calling out how you could take more to help push Fields around the turn and then grab Fields, and that you could actually get that stack more often than it seemed if you took more first, who I believe had the lower ADP at the time. But the way that they had similar, it was very similar. But
yeah, with
little
players
tactic
ahead having Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen, you could use the
and Burrow sometimes too. Yeah, exactly. So I think my hope is that people have DJ Moore, although he's been such a volatile player that maybe now you're sad you have DJ Moore. But for a minute there, he looked like the league winner from this range. So
you're happy you have him in the 4th, less happy at the 3-4 turn. Easy game.
I think that's right. Yeah. Mixon, we were real low on Mixon throughout. Is that going to hurt? How bad is that going to hurt?
Is it going to hurt?
He hasn't done like anything this year. I do think it's been like the Tony Pollard thing.
Getting all the work.
I know. I see Tony Pollard and I'm like, this guy should have been a smash. He's getting all the work. And I see Joe Mixon, like, of course he's underperforming. He sucks. But it could hurt in the long run. It has not hurt yet, but it could hurt in the long run. We probably could have used to be higher on like the very.
Oh, I lost Kyle.
All right. I'll pick that up for Kyle. We could have been higher on someone where the volume and the clear market impact was going that way. He was going about pick 45 to 50 by ADP initially. And I remember when he signed, I said, just based on other comparable players like Mattison, they see a 20% increase in their ADP. I think he ends up like the 38 to 40 range. He closes at 37. But also, if you told me Joe Mixon at ADP 37, are you taking that? I said never. So I'm pretty happy with how we played Mixon. And although the volume is there, the volume might not always be there. There's a dynamic game. There's a chance that the Bengals want to try out any of their other running backs. And I wouldn't be shocked if one of them is competent enough to displace Joe Mixon, who is not very good at football.
At this point, I'd be shocked if one of these guys is competent enough to displace Joe Mixon. Like Chase Brown, I think just got thrown on IR, and he would maybe be the one where you're like, oh, he's a ceiling. He's a ceiling in the long run because we just don't know what he is. It could be anything. The other guys like true backup special teamers. So I'll say like maybe could have used to, especially at the end. We're 8 spots behind ADP. That's maybe like the highest fade we have up until this point of the draft. It's got to be close. For a guy who his ceiling was getting every single touch on like a top 2 offense in football, could have used to have been higher, but I would have never been at ADP. I don't feel bad about having less than the field of him. To this degree, maybe could have reined it in more, but like directionally accurate is kind of what you hope for in the long run for the entire board we throw up here. And if you're accurate over the long run, you win. So
Etienne, I should also note, as we kind of take the Mixon mini L, which could honestly be a big L by the end of the year, depending on because the Bengals
could have already been a big L at this point. Like he could be a guy with 9 touchdowns at this point, just hasn't gotten there.
100%. Etienne, I think, not like our biggest win because I think we're a little bit we're just like a little ahead on ADP for the most part. It was one of those ones I remember kind of looking at my portfolio versus the ranks and feeling like I needed to do a better job drafting than we were ranking because we had Etienne ahead. And then I was looking at myself and I was like, I'm not drafting that much Etienne. And it was because I was taking, Breece Hall, or I was taking Tony Pollard, and I was like feeling like I didn't want to go back to running back in the 4th round, but I made a concerted effort in my own portfolio to get more Etienne to close the season. And I think we did a pretty good job of being ahead of Etienne. He did finally rise up. So we have him at 36, and that's even with ADP, but that's not where he was going for most of the offseason. He was kind of helped by the fact that we did see the slides for Breece Hall and Rhamondre. Yeah, he kind of got pushed up a little bit. But there was a while where he was almost like not even considered part of that group. Some of our strongest hits in kind of the way we played that, kind of classic dead zone, but it was an unusual year where the dead zone had a lot of upside in it. Brandon Ayuk, I'll note, we were slightly ahead of ADP on never a big stand for us, but that one was helpful. We had,
I think on the whole, we were really high on the 49ers offense. Less so
we were very high.
McCaffrey. I mean, I'm sure when I say we weren't high on McCaffrey, it's like we were 0.7 behind ADP. Just that edge matters when it's, I get this pick 7 times a year, but we were significantly higher on Debo. He's hurt right now. Hard to exactly evaluate. Higher on Ayuk and higher on Kittle at I think throughout the summer as well. So we had a lot of faith in the 49ers offense, which I feel very good about.
Mm-hmm. Another reason illustrates the thesis of the play as well with the contingent upside of if you're high on all 3, you're unlikely to have all 3 healthy on any given week. But on the teams where you have 1 or 2, and those are the 1 or 2 that are getting a meaningful projection increase due to another losing, you're getting more likely to hit your ceiling outcomes. And we're also high on Brock Purdy throughout. We just thought it was clear the elbow injury wasn't going to stop him from starting week 1, and the market wasn't as confident. So I feel good about how he played that passing attack, sans CMC.
Yeah, we were completely out on Trey Lance throughout the entire process and in on Purdy, and at times pretty bullish on Purdy. So that helped these rankings because it's like, well, what are you saying? Like, because we're saying Brock Purdy's going to be Brock Purdy, and he'll support the weapons. And it does make me feel like maybe we should have been a little higher on McCaffrey if this was the stance overall. I wish someone had said, hey, we're really love all the 49ers. Why don't you rank
Yeah,
McCaffrey
yeah.
one spot higher? But, you know.
What are you going to do? Come on.
Yeah. Hockenson, we ended up higher than market on, but we were lower on market on throughout, I think. That's probably one of those ones where now you're happy to not have Hockenson because Cousins got hurt, but it's sort of a sneaky L, I think, for us that Hockenson has been really good. And although we finished higher, we were lower on throughout. J.K. Dobbins, I think, was one of our best calls of the entire summer. Daniel was leading the charge there. And tears his Achilles. Just absolutely brutal. Najee Harris. Let's talk about this one, guys. All summer, Pat, you can't have Najee Harris this low. Oh yeah? Oh yeah, we should have had him even lower. I was too bullish on Najee Harris.
I will say, I haven't checked over the past 2 weeks. Way better in all the advanced rushing metrics. Like that is something that has changed. He doesn't pass the eye test.
No, he's still bad. He's still bad in all the advanced rushing metrics.
Yeah, you
either up until about 2 weeks ago, he was beating Jalen Warren and all the rushing metrics. I think.
Warren's like not good in any of the advanced rushing, but he is elite in all the receiving stuff.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the advanced rushing, Najee just looks like he doesn't look terrible, but he's like not good.
Yeah, I'll say he doesn't look terrible. Like actually in success rate, he ranks right around like Alvin Kamara and Ken Walker, and he's like negative rush yards over expected. But I do say part of the thesis was he was like Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook level of bad, and he's not that bad. I mean, he's bad. Like he is just does nothing type of player. But I'd say like he's like a below replacement average level player, which is why I'm fine with us having a very significant fade, one of the bigger fades. But I don't want to say like, could we have had him lower? I think we nailed it. Like
I'm kind of doing a bit, but feel pretty good about the math. I mean, this is probably our biggest fade. This isn't probably. This is our of the early round players. Yeah. Najee Harris was by far, I think, our biggest fade. At no point did we have him anywhere near ADP. We were ranking him aggressively below ADP for the
debate
entire
for us
summer.
all summer was: do we tick the little box in our spreadsheet that allows us to? All of our ADPs, with a few exceptions, all of our players have that anchor we talked about to ADP because we want to respect the market. I don't know if we ended up doing this or not, but do we tick the box that says we don't have to respect the market? We can rank him as bad of a pick as we think he is. I don't remember if we did that or not, but in the end, it resulted in us being, like you said, of the top 75, 80 picks, if I had to guess, maybe even closer to 100, the lowest versus ADP.
Yeah, and I think one example that illustrates this is Pat was doing some big dog draft, and he texts, "Is it fine if I take my first Najee share on this $250 buy-in team?" And I'm like, "Oh, how late past ADP? Like, at least around, but I like the team." And then he said, "Oh, if you like the team, you probably don't want to take Najee." So you don't want to get too overconfident.
I don't think I did either.
Yeah, I think you took Ken Walker, so hopefully that team.
There you go, boom.
But there is some level that you want to have to respect the market because you can look really foolish, have egg on your face, like, oh, Adam Thielen, 30 picks past ADP. How could I take that? I don't want Adam Thielen ever. So there are examples where just a full out fade will go wrong. But you also have to have some confidence in your abilities. You're playing a game where you're holding money for 6 to 8 months a year. You better hope you can do a few things right if you're going to do that.
Yeah, good point. Somehow we ended up ahead of market in the final update on Alexander Mattison, which boggles my mind. But we were behind on him throughout the entire summer, so I don't know what happened there. We blew it at the very end, but for most of the summer, we had you pointed in the right direction on Mattison. This range of receiver, we were very high on Terry McLaurin, which starting to look okay.
Yeah, the toe injury really messed that up.
Yeah, the toe injury. In general, I think maybe we probably weren't because we can talk generally about like the Batemans and the Burks probably here in this range too. I personally didn't do a good enough job of some of these in training camp injuries that were going to have an impact on the play quality in season, that maybe we should have asked for a bigger injury discount on a lot of these players. Because I think Bateman, I wasn't particularly worried about his foot injury. That seems to have maybe been a big deal. Certainly cost him. He's tumbled down the depth chart Now you could say that's because he's not very good. That could be it. But certainly that he missed all training camp on our new offensive coordinator with a foot injury also can't have helped. Burks, we had the knee injury. We got the McLaurin toe. So some of these injuries, I think, probably should have done a better job. Oh, the Jaxin Smith-Njigba wrist injury, which, Pete Carroll has talked about having a big impact on his early season playing time, and just kind of confidence and whatnot. I think in general, we probably should have been a bit more conscious of those.
Yeah,
a little more. I'll say, I think like it's clear that there are like two branching paths of like JSN coming back, getting a large role, and I think he scored touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. Like nothing crazy, but we talked about this as like, oh, we definitely we knocked JSN down. We're like, we still think that like this is the play wasn't even that he would be a week one producer. We understand that like they'll play only two wide at some point. Like it'll take some time for him to get on the field. And then we had to bump that timeline back a little bit, but now it appears as though we're winning. I think with Bateman and Burks, the way they had played at previous points in their career, left something to be desired in terms of talent evaluation. And then this made the error band, it really just made the downside specifically so much wider that like, oh, if we're not 100% correct on the talent evaluation of Burks and Bateman, both of whom I like we as a group all liked their talent, but if we are not 100% correct on that, they will tumble down the depth chart. I think it's sort of the 1-2 combo of, I think Burks is good, but you have to acknowledge the fact that maybe he's just not that good. And then if he's not that good and they can start playing him in a part-time role because of the injury, that's really where the combo ends up hurting you. So I think both it's the injury, but also maybe could have been more humble in sort of questioning their talent. But at the end of the day, like I think we have more, this guy is talented or this guy's not talented, and we rank him accordingly and hits. So, these two guys are trying to pick what we did wrong, but en masse, we generally gauge talent, I think, better than the market. I will say, though, Burks wasn't like anything special his rookie year. And then Bateman had like 4 good games last year, if I remember correctly, after being bad his rookie year as well. So the downside was very easy to be realized for them.
Yeah. Although the Burks one, I still feel like is more injury than not.
Could be. Yeah.
I think his rookie season was actually pretty solid, but it obviously wasn't great, but yeah.
Yeah, just to add on, I think that's a feature, not necessarily a bug, of using talent as the most important factor. You're going to get some wrong. And when you look at just the ones we got wrong, Rashod Bateman, probably Treylon Burks, Greg Dulcich, it's like, I think you should leave Hot Dog Meme, who's the guy that's doing this. But that's part of it. You're the guy doing this. You're trying to identify who you think the players that you're more confident in their skill and letting the rest of the chips fall where they may. But there is the input volatility on their skill. Like, we thought Rashod Bateman was good. Maybe we shouldn't have been that confident that Rashod Bateman would be the beneficiary of our Baltimore General Bowl stance. Maybe we should have been like, oh, how confident are we on Bateman versus?
Well, I think we did okay. I think we did okay there, to be honest, on Bateman. Do you have too much Bateman if you use these ranks? Yeah. Yep.
I have too much Bateman.
Yeah. But do you have a fade stance on Zay Flowers? You don't. I think we did a pretty decent job of keeping Flowers. Maybe we weren't high enough on him early, but at the end, getting Flowers up. It was kind of one of those like pivot points where like, now we need to have Flowers in a decent range here. Obviously, we're very high on Andrews. We were high on Jackson. And so like the overall Baltimore bullishness, I think you feel pretty good about. And there were ways that we played it that weren't just Bateman. And I think the fade on Odell actually feels still pretty good. Maybe it's like you'd rather that fade was just on Bateman, sure. But it was that was like one of those ones where I don't think we closed our eyes and just said you can only play it through Bateman. And then similarly, I think with Burks, I mean, we were higher than the market on Hopkins really throughout, and didn't. There was like a period where I thought the Tennessee thing was bad, but pretty quickly we ended up pretty even or even ahead on Hopkins in Tennessee. So I think we even ranked Tannehill at the very end, although we didn't really have Tannehill in the rankings all that high at any point. But anyway, we weren't like out on these 2 wide receivers. So I don't know. I don't think we had blinders on in terms of like, this is the only way that you can play it on these teams. Certainly these 2 players we had way higher than you would want to be taking them if you were redrafting today.
All right, I'm scrolling down the ranks. Two guys, totally different conversations, but I see them next to each other. Alvin Kamara was suspended, I remember, 3 games. That came in a little lighter than we all sort of thought. I think it came in lighter than everyone thought. No one was really projecting him for that. I think the range was like 4, kind of felt like the floor. It was like 4 to 6. Not the end of the world, though. Like, I don't, it's 1 or 2 games that we are missing out on. Is the usage that we were, I think, everyone was underweight on, but especially us because we were light on Alvin Kamara all summer. How do we feel about that now?
Bad. Yeah.
Bad.
That's probably one of the biggest misses. And a process miss, I think. Like, because Kamara, he didn't look like completely done to me the way some of these other guys look. He looked like he was Mixon-y, I would say. Like, he was like not great anymore, but not, or Mixon probably never really was great, but not, Kamara wasn't what he was, but he wasn't like totally washed.
He wasn't like Dalvin Cook, Cam Akers,
right.
Najee Harris heading into the year. Like, these guys look like they should be strict.
They brought nothing to the table.
Yeah, Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara look good enough to hold off actual backups. And their teams obviously have indicated that they want them to do that in their usage in previous seasons, where we see Joe Mixon have the crazy touchdown game and get all the goal line work and still get early down passing work. And obviously Alvin Kamara, one of the most like high leverage usage players in the NFL for pretty much his whole career. So yeah, probably could have used to sort of acknowledge that upside more. I still think the floor was he takes another step downwards. He's been taking steps downward in efficiency for a few years. Still think that floor was there, but probably could have priced in the ceiling of this guy gets 25 touches, 8 of which are catches a game.
Yeah,
right.
The other one was Taylor. The other one was Taylor that I had on my list of guys.
Who at the very end we were like, I don't know what's going on here, because we were kind of shook. We were truly shook on Jonathan Taylor because we had him up here the whole summer. Well, okay, I should say we had him all the way in the second round. I mean, we had him above Barkley. We had him kind of in this range. We had him above Chubb early on. And then we brought him down into like the 3rd round. But I was taking a lot of him in kind of this Debo area or ahead of Metcalf kind of area. A lot of him in that range when there was kind of a lot of him.
A lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once he got put on PUP and it was like, oh God, is this guy not going to play this season? Is he going to, play like 2 games to get an accrued year? And then it's just like, man, this is pretty rough. So you probably don't have in those like that 4-day period much of Jonathan Taylor at his cheapest. Apologies for that. But I don't know. That was just one where we didn't get it right. We didn't read the tea leaves on what was going on with Jim Irsay and this Colts situation. I think the probably thing we screwed up the most is that we thought that he could actually get traded when they weren't going to trade him. They were asking for Jalen Waddle and stuff. They were like, someone send us in retrospect, they were like, sure, JT, we'll trade you. Let's see if anyone will give us like $3 on the dollar. And oh no one will. Sucks to be you. You're on PUP now. And I think we kind of like treated it as, oh shit, maybe he goes to the Dolphins. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think
so. I guess are you still saying that you don't think he was ever injured like at any point? Like that early PUP was nothing to do with the injury. Because that's something we talked about, but we were like, it seems unlikely. This seems
no. I think he was. I think he probably, because he didn't even come back. Like he must have been dealing with that ankle injury for real.
Yeah, it's still never healed. That's why sort of why I brought it up. So that was obviously my interpretation of it. Eventually, at the end, it was never our interpretation early. Because I remember at some point saying like, so do we think there's 0 chance he's actually like meaningfully hurt? And I was like, I think there might be. But even like when I talked to you guys, like, yeah, you're probably right. This all seems to be maneuvering from both sides. And I think that's maybe the second thing we mispriced is just like not giving any credence to the fact that this guy could not practice after getting like off-season ankle injury last year. And like the error bands around our understanding of his injury were extremely high. I don't think we acknowledged that. We sort of put it all on Irsay. And then we also sort of tried to at least give him some credence as a rational actor. So I think it was like 2 big missteps in those 2 regards. that just broke our mental models for JT.
Yeah, a rare double whammy where we got wrong, like his injury, and then I remember we thought, oh, if he doesn't get traded, he'll just like be on the Colts roster, maybe on a touch limit as they get him up. But he's playing week 1. It's just about where. Then they put him on pup, and that absolutely blew our minds. We did not see that in the range of outcomes when we absolutely should have.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of Colts, how do you guys feel about Anthony Richardson, who we were aggressive on through?
Killed that pick. You got to be. Oh man, I remember talking with Patrick Daugherty, Roto Pat, and he's like, "Oh well, he has to be the most productive rookie quarterback. So you really think he's gets like 800 yards? I think that's the record for like rushing for a quarterback in their rookie season. It's like 800 yards. I was like, yeah, I'm like median projecting him for just shy of 1,000 yards. Like that's where I'm at. We were right about that. I mean, come on. I if you want to say like, no, I'm not even going to leave it in credence. Like, oh, he's going to be more injury prone because he runs. Nope. The fish really got away with one on him getting hurt. That's all I'll have to say.
Yeah. I showed my bank my Anthony Richardson and J.K. Dobbins exposure and asked for money back. And they said that's not how this works. But
yeah, it's not. Unfortunately,
the
it's
EV
not.
we got was so sweet. The process was absolutely perfect on Richardson. And he could have been QB1 if he played the whole year, probably looking at top 3 season.
100%.
Vintage Cam Newton.
Yeah. Well, guess what, guys? We'll have a chance to be above market again because he's injury prone now. I hate to tell you, he's injury prone. So you're gonna anyone who was out on Anthony Richardson is gonna be out again because he got hurt running, which means he's gonna get hurt running again. And anyone who was in thinks they were literally about to go to the bank and get real money out. So we're all going to be back in our corners for 2024 on this one. I'm telling you.
I see one on the screen. Kadarius Toney. I think we shouldn't have even put this guy up at the end because we were like way behind the very at the very.
I feel good about this one. I think we played Kadarius Toney well. All right, yeah. You guys tell me why I'm wrong, but
okay.
He sucks.
Well, yeah, he definitely. Well, that's true. But here's the way we played Kadarius Toney, and I was on with Eric Beinforth on our pod. We Legendary Sickos. We were like talking about Kadarius Toney earlier in the summer, and I was like, he's just a straight up bad pick. Like that's like I'm gonna be honest, he's just a bad pick. When he was going in the 6-7 turn, like I was like I had conviction that he was a bad pick there, but he fell all the way into almost out of the top 100 picks. And at that point, we were talking about like a 1 to 2 week absence and maybe not even an absence at all. I don't think he ended up missing any time. Right. And so I was like, okay, now maybe this falls under those training camp injuries kind of affect things more than we realize, even if it's not just the health. But in this case, probably not. I think Kadarius Toney just sucks. But I do feel like there was theoretical upside with this. Like the Chiefs wide receiver core is terrible. Sky Moore is, who, by the way, you may not know this if you just watch Ship Chasing, but we didn't actually chase Sky Moore up in these rankings. We were pretty originally. We had Rashee Rice ahead. We flipped that because the market had that flipped. We went up with Sky Moore a little bit, but then once Sky Moore jumped up, we didn't chase. We are
5.2 picks below ADP as of the final run.
Yeah,
which is to say, you could get him, but it'd be rare. He'd have to fall significantly below ADP. Because not only is it to fall 5.2 picks below ADP, then he also has to beat other people who we like ahead of ADP that would have been behind him. So you weren't getting a lot of him. I feel good about that. I think the big thing is, I get that like Kadarius Toney fell a lot. Actually being 3 picks ahead of ADP maybe isn't that bad because this was, as you pointed out, the stance for 90% of the summer.
The opportunity cost is so much lower. The opportunity cost here was, I mean, now there were big hits in this range, but I don't process wise, when you're taking a volatile player who was expensive earlier is getting discounted because of like a minor injury and still has all the same late season upside that he did have. And is a very good athlete and can earn targets, even though they're mostly just screens.
Earn is a strong word.
Earn is a strong word, yeah. but I don't know. I mean, like, I like that if you drafted off these ranks, you probably are close to even on Tony, but it's all the cheap Tony. And so from a process standpoint, that's nice. Do you wish we just took like a mega fade on Tony? Yeah. I mean, you wish I just did that so you didn't have Tony, but
yeah,
I think process wise, it's one of those misses I'm okay with.
It's not terrible. I'm poking fun. This one's not terrible. We have worse process misses.
Kyle and I jokingly hate Kadarius Toney. Maybe not jokingly. Maybe there's some vendetta there. But if you were given a blindfold and said you could have 0% of a player at their top 75 ADP and get close to even on them 25 picks later on an injury that seems like it should not be too prohibitive, you probably take that. If you open the curtains and see it's Kadarius Toney, you might be a little upset at that decision.
And I looked at this. You're probably right about that. It's like you almost all the time, if we don't think the injury is that bad, which it didn't seem terrible, you would just want to be able to basically get close to even on. If you had just Cleve on every single player, you got the best price in every single player. That might beat the rake alone, depending on how well you nail it. So that's fair. Like with proper just like stacking and roster construction, that might be all you need essentially. So it's probably fine. And I will say, as Pat pointed out, we did not buy the hype on Sky Moore to a degree. We moved him up, but we ended up falling behind on market. We ended up being way big on Rashee Rice at the end. I think just acknowledging that the Kadarius Toney is bad and banged up, even if there's still upside there, it leaves a lot of meat on the bone for another player. And if we don't want to be in on Sky Moore because he's bad, got to be on someone. And we're 14 picks ahead of ADP on Rashee Rice. 14 picks back in his range of like 150 in the draft isn't as much as like 7 earlier. But it meant that if you were looking for guys who were undervalued in his range, you were getting a lot of him. And that is proving to be super duper right. He's really good.
Yeah, that one looks pretty good. We were
especially
high on
feels good about us because Pat, you didn't really care for him as a prospect, did you? I did not.
No, I didn't think it was very prospect.
Wasn't dreadful, but I had no real desire in him. But like for us to see that like prospecting is hard, he could be good, and he plays with the Chiefs. And see that last year not get burned by Sky Moore, but then go right back to the well, back to the hand that bit you or whatever, and then be right. It feels very good about the process to not sort of miss the signal through what it was a noisy Kadarius Toney rookie or Sky Moore rookie season.
Yeah, and I think that in general, this group was well priced. Like Mingo, I still think was kind of well priced, although obviously we need to get to Thielen at some point, who was one of our bigger misses. But Rice, Mingo, and Marvin Mims, second round picks, so you could get extremely affordably. We were kind of that archetype we were overweight on, and I think that was a good archetype to be overweight on. And I agree. I think we did a good job of kind of throwing out our biases a little bit, or like, because one of the things that I think is important to keep in mind, like if you are someone who plays a lot of Dynasty or watches a lot of college football, has strong opinions on who these players are going to be, that like whether or not Rashee Rice is ultimately a really good NFL wide receiver starts to become like less relevant the further he goes down in best ball ADP, because like we see players have like flashes of relevance all the time. Like you see guys, and especially like early on in their careers, and the team wants to know, hey, what has this guy got? And they start to play more as the season goes on, and they probably are going to see the peak usage towards the end of the season. And so even dudes like Tyquan Thornton, who's like a stone cold bust, right, was in my lineup last year and like made my final lineup last year. So like that happens. So I think generally you want to be kind of interested in these rookies. You want to be open-minded on these rookies that have draft capital.
Yeah, I will say,
and maybe even that don't have draft capital, as we'll get to with Puka and Cook.
I remember where I was when we were talking about Marvin Mims. We all like Marvin Mims a lot. Like he extremely efficient and productive at a really early age in college, and then earns the draft capital that we thought was commensurate with that, which maybe not every draft Nick saw. So we feel very good about that. I do remember where I was specifically when I was like, guys, I just want to pump the brakes. Like we're locking him into the wide receiver 3 role. We've seen Sean Payton dedicate a ton of offseason roster spots to all these losers he used to have coached. And you guys are like, what are they going to do? Play little Jordan Humphrey over him? And I was like, guys, I don't know which loser it's going to be. I think it was Marquez Callaway when I said it, but it could get there. And I will say, actually, as you scroll to ADP, we ended up 2 picks ahead of him, as in once the hype completely went off the rails, we were like, yes, we still like him, but let's let the market come to us. Let's not get too far out.
Yeah,
of
we
our
didn't get
skis to
too
say, like,
nuts. Yeah.
let's not victory lap by moving him up to keep beating, quote, beating ADP in the sense of keep staying ahead of ADP. So I will say good job on us for that. And wide receiver,
because we were behind. Yeah, this doesn't really reflect it, but we were way behind. We were way ahead of him.
We were way ahead of him up until
when he was cheap. When he was really
the
cheap.
second week of preseason or whatever it was, third week maybe.
Yeah, and then if
Which
I
I feel
may
good
add on
about,
rookies, when we're trying to assess players based on talent with rookies, it's all a distribution. We don't have that much confidence in how good they're going to be.
Right.
So if the market says we think this is a 20th percentile, you then have the ability to bet on something that's far more uncertain than the certain price is baking in. And you're in a game playing for tail outcomes already. So you want to be betting on rookies who, as they all are far more uncertain talents, all have a better shot of being good. Like, what were the odds that Marvin Mims was more impactful than Alan Lazard, even as Mims drove up cost?
Yeah.
Good enough to want you to take Marvin Mims over Alan Lazard, which was really what the cost was. Rasheed Rice versus, I don't know, who's going near Rasheed Rice? Zay Jones or Michael Gallup? Van Jefferson.
Van Jefferson, yeah.
Pretty happy if you have Rasheed Rice over those guys.
Although we ended up bullish on Gallup, but Nico was interesting. Nico we ended up behind on, but we started extremely ahead on. So he's like a reverse Tony, where you got probably a lot of the cheap Nico, but we were overly worried about him.
I will say, Nico, is that right? Nico at wide receiver 59. I get, like, obviously the hindsight bias, but like, I guess maybe that's one spot we could talk about was and I think we reeled this back as the summer went on, but we as a cohort were much more interested in the Bryce Young Panthers than the CJ Stroud Texans. We just saw the Panthers being a better. I mean, we had Young ranked ahead of.
We did. We had Young ranked ahead of Stroud, but we had Stroud ahead of ADP, I think.
Yeah, we were willing to bet on the young pieces on both.
Yeah, we had Stroud way ahead of ADP.
Costs. So
we also we drafted Robert Woods like he was a thing, which he kind of is. We did have Nico Collins ahead early. We drafted Tank Dell. Dell is one of our late season or our late round, although we ended up behind, I guess. But we had
way
him
behind because of the preseason
hype. But we had him ranked draftable all off season. It's funny how some of these hype guys end up. But I'm telling you, we were high on Dell. Okay. We were early on Dell, I guess, is what better way to put it.
Yeah.
And then he got away from us.
Yeah, and with the Panthers, we were certain that there was uncertainty there. So we wanted to take Mingo, who was probably the least certain asset. But hindsight, wish I had more than the lowest possible amount in zero Adam Thielen.
Yeah, let's talk Thielen. And let's talk. Wait, before we get to Thielen, I do want to ask. So we talked about the range of outcomes thing. Daniel, that's a good point on rookies. Do you feel like we were overconfident in JSN? Because like he's maybe not that good. And and the market said he was really good. So that's kind of the thing. Like we bet with the market. We went into the market and said, "You're right, market. He's great. Let's draft him."
I didn't have that much JSN. I think pre-draft I was underweight because I grind the NFL draft a lot. I thought there was no chance he was going in the top 12, top 15. I had him bet to Seattle 29-1. So I was pretty confident in the type of player the NFL thought he was. But he had decent athleticism and he was in offense we wanted to bet on. I think he's a fine pick in the 5th, and then when he fell to the 6th round. And I think later in the season, weeks 15 to 17, you'll look back, I'm pretty happy I have this player on rosters contending for hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have him. But maybe you don't want to be too overweight. I think the ideal JSN position would be 12, 13%, whereas if you use the ranks, you're probably 15, 16.
Yeah, the guys going immediately behind JSN, or I think we have immediately ranked behind JSN, are Jordan Addison. Sure, you take Addison over him. We have them right next to each other. Then it's Zay Flowers. Probably want Zay Flowers over him. Definitely wants. Although, we talk about like.
Yeah, you want Zay Flowers over him.
They're really just scheming that guy up targets. Ideally, maybe throw him downfield more, but scheming a guy targets is better than JSN not even getting that many targets. It's trending in the right direction, though.
It's definitely better.
It's better. But it's trending in the right direction, though.
I strongly prefer it, actually.
Yeah. But then after that, the next receivers we have are Quentin Johnson, Brandon Cooks, Elijah Moore, Sky Moore, Rashod Bateman, Colton Sutton, kind of a good hit, Treylon Burks. Like, we moved him well ahead of a tier of guys who were just like wide receiver 2s on their own teams that we don't care about. and there was this what could be in the box with JSN. Like the alternative was to rank him near these other guys we had no interest in, or pump up running backs to fill that gap. When the running backs were like in this group, I see Cam Akers, Rashod White, Dave Montgomery may be a big miss on us. DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, Montgomery's probably missed.
We had Swift ahead of ADP and Pacheco ahead of ADP. So we would have had to get so far ahead of ADP on those
we
guys.
Weren't
that,
crazy low on Montgomery, but it was one of those ranges that his ADP was a little tight and we were always behind. So you're probably cursing us on Montgomery a little bit.
Yeah. So like this group right here, I still, even as JSN's run out has been like okay over the past 2 weeks and quite poor up until then, I still feel good about like taking him as a shot ahead of those guys outside of like maybe David Montgomery, maybe DeAndre Swift, but honestly, like I don't feel terrible about having Montgomery a bit behind ADP and, DeAndre Swift a little bit ahead, but it's not like I was going to flip him over JSN. So I'm fine with what we did with JSN. Like maybe we could have been marginally less bullish, but the range of guys we had ranked behind him, looking back at them, I don't feel bad about having those guys behind him for the most part. Like, sure, I'd love to have David Montgomery right now, but
yeah. All right, let's talk Thielen, because Thielen is one of the biggest misses that we have in the rankings. But in some ways, I think Thielen is sort of like the tax that you pay when you're low on Van Jefferson and Alan Lazard and Juju Smith-Schuster and Dalvin Cook and all these dust balls that we were correctly identifying as dust balls. MVS. Yeah, there were lots of these guys that we were out on. Alexander Mattison, Cam Akers, right? These players who we just didn't think had the talent. Although, guys, next time we have a stance on a guy like Alexander Mattison, can't be ahead in the final thing. That makes us look bad. But we I think did a really, really good job on being low on players that the market was boosting up because of kind of like projections, right? Opportunity bait, purely opportunity. The targets have to go somewhere, and I don't feel comfortable making the I don't know bucket as big as it ultimately ended up being. Yeah. And we didn't get this right on Thielen. We played it for Mingo, which in some ways I think compounds the problem, because now you've got like a lot of Mingos not hitting and no Thielen. My feeling on Thielen was that he's basically like someone that I would be comfortable taking if he was going kind of, and I have like, it's funny, I have like one of the final drafts I did, I took Thielen because he did fall into like the 16th round. And I was like, okay, yes, this is where he should be going. So I did draft him. I felt like he's Robert Woods. I felt like basically, okay, yeah, sure. If you treat him like Robert Woods and make me pay a little bit of a premium over Robert Woods, I'll take that. But he's not Robert Woods. He's having a great, great season. He's also like full on like having a talent resurgence. Like I was blown away. The open score numbers are like awesome on him. Like he looks like it's not just that he's getting fed targets. It's that he's like legitimately Adam Thielen still. And we made a big bet that he was no longer Adam Thielen. And that, yeah, he's wide receiver 19. And I don't think this is updated to reflect week 8, but he's wide receiver 19, wide receiver and tight end 19 in ESPN's open score, behind Stephon Diggs, ahead of Marquise Brown, ahead of Mark Andrews. So what happened?
Yeah,
why is he good again? Why is he good now?
I'll say a few things on why he is good. Now, do I think we were, like you said?
Also, the Panthers' offense sucks. You don't want to even be invested in the Panthers' offense. Like, the only way we lose is if Adam Thielen is amazing. If you told me, okay, the only way you lose is better, Adam Thielen is like vintage, like 4 years ago Adam Thielen. Yeah. Like, oh my God, we have him too high.
Yeah, I'll say to the people who drafted Thielen, like one, I think generally you pay the tax. You kind of just pay the tax for us. But we could have been.
Well, maybe not. I mean, I would love to show me your portfolio, but you also can't have Alan Lazard or Juju Smith-Schuster.
How did you spot this outlier? I think there was maybe one way to spot this outlier in that a few years ago, they get Justin Jefferson and they start playing Adam Thielen much more outside. He'd been like primarily a 50-50 plus slot receiver. He'd been just over 50% slot in his best 2 seasons in the NFL. Then they start moving to the outside more. Then they get Justin Jefferson. They move to the outside more. And also having Justin Jefferson means your targets per route run is going to plummet because it's Justin Jefferson. So they move him to a role which is not his like ideal role, far from it. And they get a guy who should earn way more targets than him. And last year, they also had TJ Hockenson, who should earn more targets than him. And of course, his numbers absolutely drop. He had not been Adam Thielen. It's correct to say he had not been Adam Thielen in like legitimately 4 years. And he's like 33 years old. So I think that's, if you're not Adam Thielen for 4 years and you're 33, I don't think you're going to be Adam Thielen again. But then he goes to a team which has no talent that can dictate how they use other players. Like Jonathan Mingo is just not good enough to say, we got to focus in on him as targets. I didn't like him as a prospect, but I also hated Adam Thielen. So I wanted to take Jonathan Mingo because I acknowledge that even if I don't like a guy as a prospect, maybe he's still good. But there was a range in which DJ Chark is a do-nothing boundary receiver, like he's mostly been throughout his career, except for a few points a long time ago. And Jonathan Mingo is a guy who only looks good as a prospect when you realize he put up like 400 yards against 2 of the worst defenses you'll ever play in college football. Otherwise, he's like a nothing burger as a prospect. And then Adam Thielen at some point has been good. And now they have, the Panthers have the freedom to use him, maximize his skill set. Their focus as an offense doesn't have to be Justin Jefferson. It gets to be Adam Thielen, which is to say he's playing a ton in the slot. He's earning a ton of, like, he's
I don't buy this case, and it's happened. Yeah. This case is ludicrous.
Yeah, no, I don't buy the case either. I'm just telling you what happened is essentially he went from being an ancillary piece of an offense that didn't have any respect for him. And now he gets to be the focal point of an offense in which they specifically are using him in the way he has been successful in the past. I didn't think this was very likely at all. I think he's one of the few players I quite literally drafted 0 times across probably something like 200 or 150, 200 drafts, something like that. I think I drafted 0 of him because I thought this case was incredibly unlikely.
Yeah,
but
across
it's the tax for the most part.
Drafts, I think he's the only player I drafted 0 times. The biggest position in my season-long portfolio, under 700 receiving yards. It closed at 550. I'll win one day. But I mean, I think there's the bet you want to make every time. The tax you pay is a great example. And I think there maybe was something to the idea that the odds that he's the best player in a sea of terrible players is there. But I also don't think you want to be betting in seas of terrible players. Like, you're fine missing the forest if you know the tree, or you're fine missing a tree if you know it's a bad forest. So I think when you're looking at bad groups of players, you're fine acknowledging 1 in every 50, 1 in every 20 will have these, I don't want to say legendary upside type seasons to refer to Adam Thielen's 2023, but you can have this massive outlier in the best way.
Yeah, no, and I think Adam Thielen's season is already massive for best ball portfolios because he's going to help you advance teams already. Like just hitting on a pick, like that level is already huge. And then if he does anything in the fantasy playoffs, I actually have to run. So maybe we should do a second part at some point where we go through the late rounds because we got to talk Puka Nacua, who was a miss for us. We got to talk Kyron Williams, who was a hit, but we could have been a little more aggressive. I think. Lots of good fun stuff in the late rounds to go through, but guys, it's a lot of fun. Daniel, Kyle, tell the people what you got going on in the NFL season.
Yeah, I'm tweeting Danny _times. Words are on the 33rd team, or if I post to my Substack, which is free to join. Not much else going on.
What's your Substack?
I have it pinned in my Twitter, but I barely read there.
Yeah, follow him on Twitter. He's a good follow. Just follow me on Twitter. I post all my stuff there at Kyle Tweets here. Waiver wire column, 32 stats from every game, unless there's less than them, but I don't change the title because I'm lazy. And start sits, plus check out Rotorwood Football Show. We did the JSN thing. Pat, I'll have you know, I really went out, stuck my neck out for JSN after he crushed with like 18 fantasy points in his 9th game. So I still hold the faith.
All right. Hey, and he scored a touchdown. Okay.
Yeah, everyone. He scored another one. I mean, of course, Jake Bobo really played the DK Metcalf role. That hurts, but
so bad. All right, check out the walkthrough. Check out Legendary Upside. We will be back. We'll do a part 2 on this. I should have known that was going to be necessary all along. But we'll talk through the late rounds at some point soon. Talk to you guys then.